June 18th, 1944. Saint-Lô, Normandy, France. The smell of wet stone and cordite, rain mixing with dust from collapsed buildings. I hear American voices before I see the uniforms, rough, loud, alive in a way I'd forgotten people could be. I'm Elise Rousseau, 29 years old, widow for 11 months, mother of 2 who should have been 3. Today marks 12 days since liberation, 12 days since the bombs stopped. But I still flinch when trucks pass. I still wait for German voices shouting orders. Freedom feels like a word I've forgotten how to pronounce. If you want to know how a single act of kindness from strangers changed everything, hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like and drop a comment telling me, what would you give to someone who'd lost everything? Let's go. I never planned to be brave. I planned to teach literature, raise my children in the house where my grandmother was born, and grow old watching Normandy seasons change. War doesn't care about plans. The Germans came in June 1940. I was 25, married to Philippe for 3 years. Our daughter Marguerite was 2. I was 6 months pregnant with our son. The occupation started with rules, curfews, identity papers, ration cards. We adapted because humans always adapt. We learned to look at the ground when German soldiers passed. We learned which shops still had food hidden in back rooms. We learned to speak in whispers. Philippe worked at the rail yard in Saint-Lô. Essential work, the Germans said. Keeping the trains running. Moving their supplies north toward the coast where they were building the Atlantic Wall. Concrete bunkers and gun emplacements to stop the invasion everyone knew was coming. I hate it, Philippe told me one night in August 1940. Every rail car I repair helps them. Every train I keep running moves their ammunition. What choice do we have? We could resist. I was 8 months pregnant. Marguerite was sleeping in the next room. The word resist felt like a match held too close to dry wood. Not yet, I whispered. When the baby comes, when things are safer. Things never got safer. Our son Henri was born in September 1940. Perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes. Philippe's eyes. He lived for 6 days. Pneumonia, the doctor said. Nothing to be done. The Germans had requisitioned most medical supplies for their own hospitals. French civilians made do with what remained, which was almost nothing. I held my son while he died. 6 days old, he never had a chance. Philippe changed after that. The grief made him reckless. He started attending meetings with men who whispered about sabotage and coordination with London. The resistance, though we didn't call it that yet. Just the network. Stop, I begged him. Please, Marguerite needs her father. Marguerite needs a France worth growing up in. In March 1943, the Gestapo arrested 17 men from Saint-Lô. Philippe was number 8. They'd been betrayed by someone in the network. We never found out who. I saw him once after the arrest. The Germans allowed wives to bring food packages to the prison in Caen. Philippe had been beaten. His left eye was swollen shut, 3 teeth missing. Take care of Marguerite, he said through split lips. Tell her I love her. You'll tell her yourself when you come home. He smiled. It broke my heart because we both knew he wasn't coming home. They shot him with the other 16 in April 1943. Against the prison wall in Caen, the Germans posted notices in every town square. This is what happens to terrorists and saboteurs. I was 28 years old, a widow, a mother, alone in occupied France with a 4-year-old daughter, and memories that weighed more than I could carry. The contrast was grotesque. German officers dined in the best restaurants on food they'd requisitioned from our farms. We ate rutabaga soup and bread, made from sawdust mixed with flour. They had wine cellars and fresh meat. Our children went to bed hungry every night. I remember watching a German major throw away half a roasted chicken because he was full. I thought about Henri dying because we couldn't get medicine. I thought about Philippe shot against a wall. I thought about breaking that major's skull with a wine bottle. I didn't. You learn to swallow rage when you have a daughter depending on you. The year after Philippe died was the longest of my life. Every day the same. Wake up, check ration cards, stand in line for bread if there was any. Teach Marguerite her letters because the schools had closed. Try not to think about my husband's body in an unmarked grave. Try not to count how many days until we all starved. The Allies bombed Saint-Lô throughout 1943 and into 1944. Targeting the rail yards Philippe used to work in. targeting the roads the Germans used for supply convoys, targeting everything and everyone because from 20,000 feet, you can't tell the difference between a German soldier and a French child. Our house was damaged in a raid in April 1944. Not destroyed, that would come later, but damaged. The roof partly collapsed. Rain came through. We moved into the cellar with 3 other families whose houses were completely gone. 10 people in a space meant for storing wine and preserves. We hung blankets for privacy. We shared 1 latrine bucket. We tried not to go mad from the closeness and the waiting, because we knew. Everyone knew. The invasion was coming. The only questions were when and where. June 6th, 1944. We heard it before dawn. Thunder that didn't stop. The cellar walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Someone's child started crying and couldn't stop. Is it the invasion? Marguerite asked. I think so. Will it be over soon? I hope so, my love. I was lying. I had no idea if it would ever be over. The bombing of St. Lo lasted for days. Not continuous. Waves of bombers, then silence, then more bombers. The Germans were fighting to hold the town because of the road junctions. The Americans were fighting to take it for the same reason. We were trapped in the middle. On June 11th, a bomb hit our building directly. I don't remember the explosion. I remember waking up buried under rubble with Marguerite screaming my name. My left leg was pinned. I couldn't feel it. Later, I learned I'd fractured my ankle and torn ligaments. At the time, I just knew I couldn't move, and my daughter was somewhere in the darkness screaming. Marguerite, where are you? Maman, I can't see. Keep talking. I'll find you. It took an hour to dig ourselves out. Marguerite found me first. She was smaller, could squeeze through gaps I couldn't fit through. Together we crawled toward daylight. 8 of the 10 people in that cellar died. Crushed instantly when the building collapsed. Marguerite and I survived, because we'd been sleeping in the corner farthest from the impact point. We climbed out into a St. Lo I didn't recognize. 70% of the town was rubble. Buildings I'd known my entire life were gone. The church where I'd married Philippe, destroyed. The school where I'd planned to teach, a crater. The cafe where my father used to drink coffee, burning. The entire town was burning. Marguerite held my hand. She was 5 years old. She'd just survived a building collapsing on her. She wasn't crying anymore. She was too shocked for tears. Where do we go, Mama? I had no answer. We walked. I limped on my damaged ankle. Marguerite helped me. A 5-year-old helping her mother through a destroyed city. The world had gone completely insane. We found other survivors in what remained of the town square. Maybe 40 people. All of us covered in dust and blood and rubble. All of us stunned silent by what remained of our lives. An old woman I'd known since childhood sat on a broken wall. They destroyed us to liberate us, she said to no one in particular. The Americans destroyed us to save us. She started laughing, then crying, then both at once. The German soldiers were gone, retreated or dead. For 3 days, St. Lo belonged to no one. Just survivors wandering through ruins, looking for food, for water, for family members who'd never answer. I found our neighbor, Monsieur Leclerc, in the remains of his house. Dead, crushed under a beam. His hand was reaching toward a photograph of his wife who'd died in 1941. Even in death, he was trying to reach her. I couldn't bury him. I could barely walk. I said a prayer and kept moving. June 18th, the Americans arrived. I heard them first. Tank engines. Different from German panzers, louder, higher pitched. Then voices in English shouting orders I couldn't understand. Marguerite and I were sheltering in a partially collapsed bakery. No roof, no walls on 2 sides, but it blocked the wind and the rain that had been falling for 2 days. We had no food, no water, except what we collected in a tin can when it rained. My ankle was infected. I could smell it going bad. Marguerite had stopped asking when we'd eat. She just stared with those huge, hollow eyes that children get when they've seen too much. The American soldiers came around the corner. 3 of them. Rifles up, scanning for threats. They saw us. 2 filthy scarecrows in the ruins. A woman who could barely stand, and a tiny girl who looked like a ghost. The lead soldier, young, maybe 22, corporal stripes on his helmet, lowered his rifle immediately. Jesus Christ, he said. Then louder. Medic, We got civilians here. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Not threat, not anger, concern. A fourth soldier appeared, red cross on his helmet, medical bag over his shoulder. He knelt beside us. Ma'am, can you understand me? Parlez-vous anglais? Un peu. I managed. A little. My English was terrible. You're hurt. Your leg. Yes, we're going to help you. You're safe now. The Germans are gone. Safe, that word again. I didn't know what it meant anymore. The medic, his name was Wilson, I learned later, from Virginia, examined my ankle. His face told me everything I needed to know. This needs proper treatment. We need to get you to a field hospital. He called over one of the other soldiers. Together they fashioned a stretcher from a door and some rope. Marguerite climbed on with me. She wouldn't let go of my hand. They carried us 3 blocks to where the Americans had set up a temporary aid station in a building that still had most of its walls. 20 wounded people already there. GIs with bandaged heads, French civilians with broken bones. 1 German prisoner with his arm in a sling. A captain was directing traffic. Young, exhausted, efficient. He saw us arrive. Another civilian? Woman and child, sir. She's got a bad infection. The kid looks malnourished. The captain looked at us. Really looked. His expression changed. Get them inside. Priority treatment. But sir, we've got wounded. I said priority. Look at them, Wilson. When's the last time they ate? I don't know what my face looked like. I don't know what Marguerite looked like. But whatever the captain saw made him override protocol. They brought us inside, laid me on a cot. A doctor appeared. An actual doctor with clean hands and medical supplies and antibiotics. Let's see that ankle. He cut away my makeshift bandage, a strip of cloth from my skirt. The smell that came out made him grimace. Infected pretty bad. Another few days and you'd have lost the leg. Maybe lost more than that. He cleaned the wound. It hurt worse than the original injury. I bit down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. Marguerite held my other hand. When he finished, he wrapped it in clean bandages and gave me 2 pills. Sulfa drugs. Antibiotic. Take 1 now, 1 tonight. We'll get you more tomorrow. I have no money. You don't need money. You're a civilian casualty. The U.S. Army takes care of that. I stared at him. For 4 years, the Germans had taken everything. Food, medicine, lives. They took and took until there was nothing left to take. And now these Americans were giving. Without asking anything in return, the doctor turned to Marguerite. Hey there, sweetheart. What's your name? She didn't understand. I translated. Marguerite, she whispered. That's pretty. Like a flower, right? When's the last time you ate, Marguerite? Again I translated. Marguerite held up 3 fingers. 3 days? The doctor's face hardened. He called to a soldier passing by. Baker, get me 2 K rations. Now. 2 minutes later, Marguerite was holding a rectangular cardboard box. She looked at me, confused. It's food, I told her in French. American food. The soldier showed her how to open it. Inside, crackers, canned cheese, chocolate bar, cigarettes, matches, gum, and a small can of meat. Marguerite ate the crackers so fast she choked. I made her slow down. Easy, my love. There's more. You can eat it all. All of it? Just for me? Just for you. She cried while she ate. Not from sadness. From the overwhelming reality of having food. Real food. Food that wasn't moldy bread or watery soup. I got a K ration too. I ate the cheese first. It was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. Not because it was high quality. It was processed American military ration cheese. But because for 4 years I'd been hungry, and now I wasn't. The chocolate bar made me weep. The medic Wilson noticed. Ma'am, you okay? Yes, I managed in broken English. Just 4 years. No chocolate for 4 years. He smiled sadly. Reached into his pack. Pulled out 3 more chocolate bars. Here, for the kid. And for you. I cannot. You can. Take them. We've got plenty. Plenty. What a concept. The Germans had plenty and shared nothing. The Americans had plenty and couldn't give it away fast enough. That first day, the soldiers gave us food, medicine, clean water, blankets, a safe place to sleep. They asked for nothing except our names for their records. But the blankets, that's what broke me. It was getting dark. The temperature was dropping. June in Normandy can still be cold, especially at night, especially when you've been starving and your body has no reserves left. Marguerite was shivering on the cot. I'd wrapped her in my coat, but it wasn't enough. I was shivering too, but I didn't care. I just needed my daughter to be warm. A soldier passed by. Young kid, private stripes, couldn't have been more than 19. From Nebraska, I learned later. He saw us shaking. He didn't say anything, just walked away. 5 minutes later, he came back with 2 wool blankets. Army issue. Olive drab, thick and warm. He held them out to me. For you and the little one. Gets cold at night. I stared at the blankets. Then at him. Then back at the blankets. But you need them. For soldiers. We've got enough. You need them more. But, he smiled. Just a kid. Thousands of miles from home. Fighting someone else's war in someone else's country. And smiling because he could give a blanket to a stranger. Ma'am, it's okay. Really, take them. I took the blankets. Wrapped one around Marguerite immediately. She stopped shivering almost instantly. Merci, I whispered. Then in broken English, thank you. Thank you so much. You're welcome, ma'am. You've been through enough. He walked away before I could say anything else. I sat on that cot holding my daughter, both of us wrapped in American Army blankets, and I cried. Not from sadness or pain or loss, from the shocking, overwhelming, incomprehensible kindness of strangers who owed us nothing and gave us everything. For 4 years, the Germans had taught us that humans were cruel, that power meant taking, that strength meant crushing anyone weaker. And in one day, these American soldiers taught us something different, that humans could be kind, that power could protect instead of destroy, that strength could lift instead of crush. I'd spent 11 months as a widow convinced the world was only darkness. And then a 19-year-old kid from Nebraska gave me a blanket, and I remembered there was still light. That night, sleeping on a U.S. Army cot with my daughter warm beside me, I wrote in my diary, they gave us blankets, just gave them. Didn't ask what we'd done to deserve them or what we could pay. Just saw we were cold and gave us warmth. I don't understand these Americans, but I'm beginning to think Philippe died, hoping people like this existed. And maybe he was right. The next morning, more soldiers arrived. Engineers with equipment to clear rubble, medical teams with supplies, trucks full of emergency rations. The Americans were setting up a displaced persons camp on the edge of town for survivors who'd lost their homes, which was nearly everyone. Captain Morrison, I learned his name later, organized the evacuation. He walked through the aid station personally, checking on every civilian. When he reached us, he crouched down to Marguerite's level. Hey there, kiddo. You feeling better? She didn't understand, but she smiled. First real smile I'd seen in weeks. Mrs. Rousseau? He said to me. We're moving everyone to a DP camp about 2 kilometers west. It's safer there. We've got tents, medical facilities, food distribution. We'll get you registered and figure out your situation. My house... I'm sorry, ma'am. I saw the damage reports. Your building is a total loss. Too dangerous to enter. If you had anything inside, everything. I said quietly. Everything I owned was inside. Photographs of Philippe, our wedding album. Henri's blanket from the 6 days he lived. My grandmother's books. My father's watch. Every physical connection to my life before the war. Gone. Captain Morrison's expression softened. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't help, but I'm sorry. You saved us. That helps. He nodded, stood up. We're going to take care of you. You and your daughter. That's a promise. And they did. The displaced persons camp was a revelation. Hundreds of white tents in organized rows, clean latrines, water distribution points, medical tents, food lines. American efficiency applied to human suffering. We were assigned Tent 47, Section C. Space for 4 families. We shared it with 2 other mothers and their children. All widows. All survivors. All trying to figure out how to live in what came after. The Americans provided everything. Cots, blankets, clothing from donated supplies. 3 meals a day. More food than I'd seen in years. Medical checks every week. But more than the supplies, they provided something else. Dignity. The Germans had treated us like animals, barely worth feeding. disposable labor and inconvenient obstacles. The Americans treated us like human beings who mattered. Soldiers learned our names, asked about our children, shared photographs of their own families back home, played games with the kids, made jokes we didn't always understand but laughed at anyway because laughter felt like medicine. Sergeant Mitchell from Chicago taught Marguerite basic English phrases. Hello. Thank you. My name is Marguerite. She practiced every day, proud of each new word. Corporal James from Texas showed the children how to play baseball with a stick and a ball made from wrapped rags. None of us understood the rules, but we cheered anyway. Lieutenant Davis from Oregon organized a makeshift school in one of the larger tents, teaching basic reading and math to children who'd missed years of education. They didn't have to do any of this. They were soldiers. Their job was fighting Germans, not teaching French children, or learning our names or caring whether we felt human again. But they did it anyway. 3 weeks into camp life, I was walking to the food distribution point when I saw the young private who'd given us blankets that first night. He was unloading supply trucks. I walked up to him. He didn't recognize me. I looked different, clean and fed, and wearing donated clothes that actually fit. Excuse me. You are Nebraska? He looked confused, then recognized me. His face lit up. Oh, ma'am, you're the lady with the daughter. Marguerite, right? How is she? Good, very good. Because of you. Me? I didn't do anything. You gave us blankets. Oh, yeah. Well, you were cold. It was not just blankets. It was hope. You gave us hope. He looked embarrassed. Ma'am, I just gave you some blankets, that's all. No. You gave us proof that good people still exist. After 4 years of Germans taking everything, you gave something. You didn't have to. You just did. That matters. His eyes got wet. My mom wrote me. She said to remember the people we're liberating are just people. Like us. She said to treat everyone the way I'd want someone to treat her if America got invaded. Your mother is wise. She'd like you. She'd like your daughter. We stood there for a moment. A French widow and an American farm boy, connected by wool blankets and the impossible kindness of strangers in war. Thank you, I said again. For everything. You're welcome, ma'am. I'm glad you're safe now. Safe. That word was starting to mean something again. July brought more changes. The Americans pushed south from Normandy. The fighting moved away from St. Lo. Engineers began clearing rubble from the town. Displaced persons started returning to see what remained of their homes. I went back once. With Marguerite, we walked to where our house had been. It was gone. Completely. Just a pile of broken stone and splintered wood. 4 years of memories buried under rubble. Marguerite squeezed my hand. What do we do now, Mama? I looked at my daughter. 5 years old. She'd lost her father, her brother, her home, her childhood. She should have been broken. But she was smiling, because earlier that morning, Sergeant Mitchell had given her a piece of gum. Such a small thing. Such enormous joy. We rebuild, I told her. Somehow we rebuild. With the Americans helping? Yes, with the Americans helping. We walked back to camp, to Tent 47, to the community of survivors who were becoming family, to the American soldiers who gave us blankets and hope, and a reason to believe the world could still be kind. I didn't know what came next. Didn't know how we'd rebuild a life from nothing. Didn't know if France would ever heal from 4 years of occupation and the destruction of liberation. But I knew we weren't alone. And sometimes, that's enough to start with. That night, I wrote in my diary, Philippe fought so children like Marguerite could grow up free. He died believing that freedom was worth dying for. I used to wonder if he was right, if any cause was worth that sacrifice. Now I'm beginning to understand. He didn't die for abstract ideas. He died hoping that someday, someone would see his daughter cold and give her a blanket. He died believing that kindness could exist in a world gone mad. And here in this camp, surrounded by American soldiers who owe us nothing and give us everything, I finally understand what he died for. Not for France. For the idea that humans can still choose to be good. And maybe that's worth everything. July 1944. Displaced Persons Camp. St. Lo, Normandy. The sound of children laughing. I'd forgotten that sound existed. In the camp playground, Really just a cleared patch of dirt with some rope swings the engineers rigged up. Marguerite plays with 6 other children while American soldiers watch protectively. I'm sitting outside Tent 47, mending a donated dress with donated thread. Simple work. Peaceful work. The kind of ordinary moment that feels like a miracle after 4 years of war. It's been 5 weeks since liberation. 5 weeks since I believed I might die in the rubble of my home. Today, Marguerite asked if we could stay here forever. I didn't know how to explain that here is temporary, that we have to rebuild, that life demands we keep moving forward even when we don't know how. August brought changes to the camp. The immediate crisis was over. People had food, shelter, medical care. Now came the harder question. What next? The Americans organized registration sessions. Every displaced person had to document their situation. Name, age, occupation, property lost, family status, plans for the future, plans. What plans could any of us have? Our homes were rubble, our savings worthless, our jobs disappeared. We were starting from less than 0. Captain Morrison ran my interview personally. He sat across from me in the administrative tent with a clipboard and a translator. A French-American corporal from Louisiana named Benoit. Mrs. Rousseau. Let's start with the basics. Your full name? Elise Marie Rousseau, née Fontaine. Age? 29. Occupation before the war? Teacher. Literature. But the school closed in 1941. And your husband? I swallowed. Philippe Rousseau, railway worker. Executed by the Germans in April 1943 for resistance activities. Captain Morrison's pen stopped. He looked up. I'm sorry. Thank you. Do you have any other family? Parents? Siblings? My parents died before the war. My brother was killed at Dunkirk in 1940. Philippe's parents died in a bombing raid last year. I have no one. Just Marguerite. He wrote that down. When he finished, he looked at me carefully. Mrs. Rousseau, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? I don't know. That's honest. Most people don't. But we need to figure something out. The camp is temporary. By winter, we'll need to transition everyone to more permanent housing. My house is destroyed. I know. We've documented that. But there are options. The French provisional government is setting up reconstruction programs, housing assistance, job placement. You're young, educated, skilled. You'll qualify for support. Young. I hadn't felt young in years. What about teaching again? I asked. The schools will reopen. Maybe not this year, but soon. France will need teachers, especially teachers who survived the occupation, who can teach the next generation what happened, what it cost. The idea took root. Teaching again. Doing the work I'd loved before the war stole everything. I'd like that, I said quietly. I'd like to teach again. Then that's what we'll work toward. We'll connect you with the education ministry. Get you registered for when positions open. He made notes, then looked up again. Mrs. Rousseau, I have to ask. During the occupation, did you have any involvement with resistance activities? My heart stopped. Was this a trap? Would my husband's execution mark me as dangerous? Corporal Benoit saw my face. Ma'am, this isn't an accusation. It's for your benefit. The provisional government is recognizing resistance families. There may be pensions, support programs, acknowledgement of sacrifice. Philippe was in a network, I said carefully. They arrested him with 16 others, shot them all. I wasn't involved directly. I had Marguerite to protect. But you knew. Yes, I knew. Captain Morrison nodded. That's noted. We'll forward this to the French authorities. Your husband's sacrifice should be recognized. After the interview, I walked back to Tent 47 feeling lighter somehow. Not happy. Happiness felt too far away still. But less lost. Like maybe there was a path forward, even if I couldn't see the whole thing yet. Madame Dubois was waiting outside the tent. She shared our space. A widow like me, though older. Her husband had died in the first bombardment. Her 2 sons were prisoners of war somewhere in Germany. She didn't know if they were alive. How did it go? She asked. They want to help. They asked what I want to do. And what do you want? To teach again. To give Marguerite a normal life. To stop feeling like we're just surviving and start feeling like we're living. She smiled sadly. We all want that. That evening, Sergeant Mitchell found me at dinner. He'd become a friend over the weeks. He checked on Marguerite almost daily, taught her new English words, brought her chocolate when supplies arrived. "Mrs. Rousseau? Got a minute?" "Of course." He sat down across from me, looked uncomfortable. "So, my unit's shipping out next week. We're moving south to support the drive toward Paris, and I wanted to make sure you and Marguerite were okay before I left." My chest tightened. I'd known this was coming. The soldiers weren't staying forever. They had a war to finish, but knowing didn't make it easier. "We'll be okay," I said, "thanks to you and the others." "You sure?" "Because I talked to Captain Morrison. He said you're on the list for housing assistance. And there's a teaching position opening up in Bayeux. Not St. Lo, but close. You'd qualify." "You talked to Captain Morrison about me?" He looked embarrassed. "Well, yeah. You and Marguerite have been through hell. Figured someone should make sure you had a shot at something better." I couldn't speak. This soldier from Chicago who owed me nothing had spent his free time arranging my future. "Thank you," I managed. "You didn't have to do that." "Sure I did. That's what we're here for, not just winning the war, winning the peace too." Before he left, he gave me something. A small cardboard box. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside, a wool blanket. Army issue, olive drab, the same kind he'd given us that first night. "You already gave us blankets," I said, confused. "This one's different. Take it with you when you leave camp, when you get your new place. Hang on to it. And when things get hard, because they will get hard, remember that people cared, that you weren't alone, that there's still good in the world." I hugged him. I couldn't help it. This practical Midwestern American who probably felt awkward about emotions. I hugged him and cried and thanked him in broken English and French all mixed together. "Take care of that little girl," he said. "She's special." "I will. I promise." He left the next morning with his unit, 50 trucks rolling south toward the fighting. I stood with Marguerite and watched them go. "Will we see Sergeant Mitchell again?" she asked. "I don't know, my love. I hope so. He was nice. He was. Very nice. We never saw him again. I found out years later he was killed in the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge. December 1944. 19 years old. He survived the bocage and the breakout and the liberation, only to die in the winter cold 6 months later. But I didn't know that then. Then I just knew he'd given us a blanket and a future, and a reason to believe kindness existed. September brought the news everyone was waiting for. Paris liberated. General de Gaulle returning. The provisional government establishing control. France was becoming France again. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. The camp population started declining. Families found relatives. Housing programs placed people in temporary apartments. The reconstruction was beginning. Captain Morrison called me to his office in mid-September. "Mrs. Rousseau, good news. We found you a place." "A place?" "A small apartment in Bayeux. 2 rooms, basic but intact. And the Education Ministry confirmed. They're reopening the École Primaire in November. They need teachers. You're hired if you want it." I stared at him. "An apartment. A job. A life. Yes. Yes, I want it." "Good. We'll arrange transport next week. Get you and Marguerite settled before the school term starts." Captain Morrison, I don't know how to thank you. You and your men, you've done so much." He held up a hand. "Mrs. Rousseau, you don't need to thank me. You survived. You protected your daughter through 4 years of hell. You kept going when you had every reason to give up. That's not nothing. That's everything. We just helped a little bit at the end. It was more than a little bit. Maybe. But you did the hard part. You survived. Now you get to live." The week before we left camp, something unexpected happened. The Americans organized a celebration. Nothing fancy. They called it a going-away party for the families transitioning out. They set up tables in the central area, brought out food, real food, not just rations. Bread, cheese, some liberated wine, even cake baked by the mess sergeants. An enterprising corporal found a phonograph and some records. American swing music echoed across the camp. Children ran everywhere. Adults talked and laughed. Soldiers danced with French widows who hadn't danced in years. Lieutenant Davis asked me to dance. I hadn't danced since before Philippe died. I'd forgotten how. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not very good either. We'll figure it out together." So we danced. Badly, stepping on each other's feet, laughing at our own awkwardness. And for 5 minutes, I wasn't a widow or a survivor or a refugee. I was just a woman dancing to music and remembering what joy felt like. Marguerite danced too, with Corporal James, who picked her up and spun her around until she shrieked with laughter. She was 6 years old now. She'd spent half her life under occupation. But here, in this moment, she was just a child being a child. That night, lying in Tent 47 for the last time, I wrote in my diary, "Tomorrow we leave for Bayeux. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. I'm terrified, but also hopeful, because these Americans showed us something important. The world isn't just darkness. There are people who give blankets to strangers, who organize dances for refugees, who fight wars but still remember to be human." Philippe believed in that. He died believing it. And now I've seen proof he was right. That has to be enough to build on. The apartment in Bayeux was small. 2 rooms on the 3rd floor of a building that had survived mostly intact. 1 room for sleeping, 1 for everything else. A shared bathroom down the hall. No electricity yet. The power grid was still being repaired. But it had walls and a roof and a door that locked and windows that looked out on a street where people walked without fear. It was paradise. Marguerite ran from corner to corner. "Maman, we have our own place. Our own door." "We do, my love. Can we stay here forever?" "For as long as we need to." The Americans had provided basics. 2 cots, blankets, including the one Sergeant Mitchell gave me. Plates, cups, utensils, a small stove. The French provisional government added ration cards and a clothing allowance. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The teaching position started in November 1944. 23 students, ages 6 to 10, crammed into a classroom that had been a storage room before the war. No textbooks yet. Those were being reprinted. No proper desks. We used planks across sawhorses. No heat, except a small wood stove the Americans had donated. But we had students. We had hope. We had a future to build. Teaching children who'd lived through occupation was different from anything I'd trained for. They'd seen things no child should see. They'd lost parents, siblings, homes. They flinched at loud noises. They hoarded food even when we assured them there'd be more. So I taught them more than reading and mathematics. I taught them that adults could be trusted again, that the world could be safe, that learning mattered even when everything else had fallen apart, and slowly, so slowly, they started healing. Marguerite attended my class. She sat in the front row and beamed with pride every time I called on her. Her English was better than the other children. Sergeant Mitchell's lessons had stuck. She taught them words and phrases, became a bridge between French and American when GIs occasionally visited. Because they did visit, not Sergeant Mitchell. He was dead, though I didn't know it yet, but other soldiers. The American presence in Normandy continued. Engineers rebuilding infrastructure, medical teams supporting French hospitals, supply units distributing aid. And sometimes soldiers would stop by the school, bring candy for the children, books donated from the States, pencils and paper, small kindnesses that meant everything. In December, Corporal Benoit, the translator from Louisiana, found me at the school. He'd been reassigned to civil affairs work in Bayeux. "Mrs. Rousseau, got something for you." He handed me an official-looking envelope. French government seal. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside, a certificate recognizing Philippe as a member of the French resistance, acknowledging his sacrifice, and a letter informing me that I qualified for a war widow's pension. Not much. The provisional government was broke, but something. Acknowledgement that my husband's death had mattered. I sat down at my desk and cried, not from sadness, from relief, from validation. Philippe hadn't died for nothing. His sacrifice was recognized. His name would be remembered. "There's more," Benoit said gently. "They're planning a memorial in Saint-Lô when the rebuilding is further along. They want to list all the resistance members who died. Philippe's name will be there." "Thank you. Thank you for arranging this." "I didn't arrange much. Captain Morrison did most of it. He made sure your husband's file got to the right people. Captain Morrison. Even after we left camp, he was still looking out for us. Christmas 1944 was strange. The war wasn't over. Germany was still fighting. The Battle of the Bulge was raging. But in Bayeux, we had peace. Fragile, temporary, but real. The Americans organized a Christmas celebration for local children. Toys donated from the States. Real chocolate. A soldier dressed as Santa Claus. The children didn't understand who he was supposed to be, but they loved it anyway. Marguerite got a doll. A real cloth doll with yarn hair and button eyes. She'd never owned a toy that nice. She slept with it every night. Maman, why do the Americans give us so much? Because they're kind. But why? How do you explain to a 6-year-old that some humans choose goodness even when they don't have to? That kindness isn't transactional? That some people give simply because others need? Because that's what good people do, I said. They see someone suffering and they help. Not for reward. Just because it's right. Like Papa? Yes, exactly like Papa. She hugged her doll. I want to be like that when I grow up. You already are, my love. Winter was hard. Food shortages continued. The power grid remained unreliable. The cold seeped through every crack in our thin walls. But we had the blankets. We had each other. We survived. In March 1945, I received a letter. American return address. I didn't recognize the name. Inside, a letter from Sergeant Mitchell's mother. Somehow, she'd gotten my address. Her son had written home about us, about the French widow and her daughter in the destroyed town, about giving blankets and helping rebuild. Dear Mrs. Rousseau, I'm writing to tell you that my son Thomas was killed in Belgium in December. He died instantly, they tell me, which is supposed to be a comfort but isn't. I found your name in his letters home. He wrote about you and your daughter, about how brave you were, about how much you'd lost and how you kept going anyway. He said helping you reminded him why we were fighting this war, that it wasn't just about defeating Germans. It was about helping people like you rebuild. I wanted you to know that my son's last months had purpose, that he made a difference in your life. It helps somehow to know his death wasn't meaningless. Please hug your daughter for me. Tell her Thomas's mother is proud of her. With sympathy and hope, Mrs. Eleanor Mitchell, Chicago, Illinois. I wrote back immediately. Told her everything her son had done for us, how he'd given us blankets that first night, how he'd taught Marguerite English, how he'd arranged my teaching position, how we kept one of those blankets, and when things got hard, we wrapped ourselves in it and remembered kindness existed. I told her that her son was a hero, not for killing Germans, for keeping humanity alive in the middle of inhumanity. We corresponded for years after that. Mrs. Mitchell and I, two mothers on opposite sides of an ocean, connected by war and loss, and the memory of a boy from Chicago who gave blankets to strangers. May 8th, 1945. Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. Bayeux celebrated in the streets. Church bells rang, people embraced, wine flowed. Years of fear and deprivation suddenly released in one explosive moment of joy. But the joy was complicated. Yes, we'd won. Yes, we'd survived. But at what cost? France was devastated. Millions dead. Cities destroyed. An entire generation traumatized. And the occupation had revealed ugly truths. Collaboration. Betrayal. French people who'd helped Germans oppress other French people. The reckoning was coming, and it would be brutal. In our small apartment, Marguerite and I listened to the celebrations outside. She looked up at me with those serious eyes that children shouldn't have. Is it really over, Maman? The fighting is over, yes, but not everything. No, not everything. It will take years to rebuild, years to heal. Some things may never heal completely. Are you sad? I'm relieved and grateful, and sad for everyone we lost. All at the same time. She hugged me. At least we have each other. Yes, at least we have that. The years after the war were hard in different ways. The physical rebuilding happened relatively quickly. American aid, the Marshall Plan, French determination. By 1950, most cities were functioning again. Roads repaired, buildings restored, infrastructure rebuilt. But the emotional rebuilding took longer. The scars went deeper. I taught for 34 years, educated 3 generations of French children, taught them history, the real history, including the uncomfortable parts about collaboration and resistance, and the moral complexity of occupation. Marguerite grew up, studied nursing, married a kind man who'd fought in the Free French forces, had 3 children of her own, gave me grandchildren who never knew war. I never remarried. Philippe had been my love. After him, there was just moving forward, just surviving and rebuilding and trying to make sure his death counted for something. In 1964, on the 20th anniversary of liberation, the Americans returned to Normandy for commemorations, veterans visiting the beaches where they'd landed, the cemeteries where their friends were buried, the towns they'd liberated. Corporal Benoit came to Bayeux. He was a lawyer now in New Orleans, married, 3 kids, successful practice. But he remembered, we had coffee in a cafe that hadn't existed in 1944 because the building had been rubble then. Mrs. Rousseau, do you ever think about those days? The camp? Liberation? Every day. How could I not? Do you regret anything? Wish anything had been different? I thought about it. Really thought. I wish Philippe hadn't died. I wish Henri had lived. I wish Marguerite hadn't lost her childhood to war. I wish none of it had happened. But if it had to happen, if the war was inevitable, then I'm grateful it ended with people like you and Sergeant Mitchell and Captain Morrison, people who remembered we were human, who gave blankets to freezing strangers, who organized dances for refugees, who fought a war but didn't lose their humanity in the fighting. We were just doing our jobs. No, you were doing more than your jobs. You were choosing kindness when cruelty was easier. That's not training, that's character. He smiled. I'll tell the guys you said that, the ones still around. How many are still around? Not enough. Never enough. We sat in silence for a moment, remembering the dead. Mrs. Rousseau, can I ask you something? Of course. That blanket Sergeant Mitchell gave you. Do you still have it? I smiled. It's at home. Marguerite wanted it when she got married. I gave it to her. She says she'll pass it to her daughter someday. Good. That's good. Tom would have liked that. Did you know him well? Pretty well. He talked about you. About how you'd lost everything but kept going. He said you were the bravest person he'd ever met. I wasn't brave. I was just surviving. Same thing sometimes. Maybe he was right. Maybe survival was its own kind of courage. I lived to see the 50th anniversary of liberation in 1994. I was 79 years old. Marguerite was 55. My grandchildren were adults. The world had moved on. But Normandy never forgot. The beaches were still there. The cemeteries were still there. And once a year, the world stopped to remember what happened here. What it cost. What was saved. Marguerite accompanied me to the ceremony. We stood in the American cemetery at Colleville-sur-Mer, 9,000 white crosses stretching toward the sea, 9,000 American boys who died liberating strangers. Maman, do you think they knew? The soldiers? Do you think they understood what they were dying for? Some did. Some just followed orders. But men like Sergeant Mitchell, yes, he knew. He knew he was fighting so French children could grow up free, so mothers wouldn't starve, so the world could be better than it was. Do you think it worked? Is the world better? I looked at my daughter, educated, free, married to a man she chose, mother to children who'd never known hunger or occupation or fear, living in a France that was peaceful and prosperous and democratic. Yes, I said. Yes, I think it worked. That night, back in my small apartment in Bayeux, I'd never left, never wanted to. I took out Sergeant Mitchell's blanket. Marguerite had returned it to me years ago, said it belonged with me. It was worn now, threadbare in places. The olive drab faded to grayish green, but still warm, still useful. Still carrying the memory of the night a 19-year-old kid from Chicago saw a stranger in need and gave something of himself without asking anything in return. I wrapped it around my shoulders and wrote one last entry in my diary. I'm an old woman now. Philippe has been dead for 51 years. Henri never got to be anything but a memory. Most of the people I knew during the war are gone. But I'm still here, still teaching, still remembering, still telling the story of what happened when the world went mad, and then, impossibly, found its way back to sanity. The Americans saved us, not just with tanks and bombs and military might, with blankets, with chocolate, with kindness, with the simple human decency to see suffering and respond with compassion. They saved us by being better than they had to be. That's the lesson I've spent 50 years teaching. That even in the darkest times, humans can choose goodness. That power doesn't have to corrupt. That strength can protect instead of destroy. Philippe died believing that. The Americans proved he was right. And Marguerite, beautiful, strong Marguerite, she carries that lesson forward, and her children will carry it forward. And maybe, just maybe, the world will remember that kindness is not weakness, that giving to strangers is not foolishness, that we are all, in the end, just humans trying to survive. And we survive better when we help each other. That's what the blanket taught me. That simple wool blanket from a boy who didn't live to see 20. It taught me that hope is not naive, that goodness is not extinct, that even in war humanity endures. I've kept that blanket for 50 years, and I'll keep it until I die, and then Marguerite will keep it, and her daughter after her. A family heirloom born from the kindness of strangers. Because some things are worth keeping. Some memories are worth preserving. Some lessons are worth passing down through generations. The lesson is simple. Be kind. Give blankets to strangers. Remember that we're all human. Choose goodness even when cruelty is easier. That's what the Americans taught me. That's what Philippe died for. That's what I've spent my life trying to honor. And somehow, improbably, impossibly, it was enough. I died in 1998, 83 years old, surrounded by family. Marguerite held my hand. My grandchildren were there. Even 2 great-grandchildren I'd lived long enough to meet. The blanket was draped across my bed, still warm, still carrying memories. At my funeral, Marguerite spoke. She told the story of liberation, of the Americans arriving in St. Lo, of the soldier who gave blankets to a freezing widow and her daughter, of how that simple act of kindness had rippled through decades. My mother taught me, Marguerite said, that we honor the dead by living well, by being kind, by remembering what was sacrificed so we could be free. She taught me that blankets are not just blankets. They're symbols of warmth and coldness, of hope and despair, of humanity and inhumanity. She held up the blanket, threadbare and faded but still intact. This blanket has been in our family for 54 years. It will stay in our family for 54 more, and every generation will know the story. We'll remember Sergeant Thomas Mitchell from Chicago. We'll remember that Americans came across an ocean to liberate strangers. We'll remember that kindness is never wasted. The blanket hangs in Marguerite's home now, in a place of honor. Her children know the story. Her grandchildren know the story. And someday, her great-grandchildren will know it too. Because some stories are worth keeping. Some lessons are worth teaching. Some memories refuse to fade. I was Elise Rousseau, a widow who survived, a mother who kept going when giving up would have been easier, a teacher who spent her life making sure the next generation understood what freedom cost and why it mattered. But mostly, I was a woman who received a blanket from a stranger and learned that the world, despite everything, could still be good. That lesson saved my life, and I spent the rest of my life teaching it to anyone who would listen. Because in the end, that's all we have, the choice to be kind, to give blankets to strangers, to remember we're all human, to honor the dead by living well. Sergeant Mitchell made that choice. Captain Morrison made that choice. Thousands of American soldiers made that choice every day during the liberation and Reconstruction. They didn't have to. They could have just fought the war and gone home. Could have treated us as inconvenient obstacles or useful propaganda. Could have taken our gratitude as their due and given nothing in return. But they didn't. They gave. They shared. They cared. And that made all the difference. This story matters because it's not just about war. It's about what we choose to do when we have power. Do we crush those weaker than us? Or do we lift them up? Do we take? Or do we give? Elise Rousseau spent 50 years teaching that lesson. Now I'm teaching it to you. If this moved you, if this made you think about the kind of person you want to be, then hit that subscribe button. Smash the like, and in the comments tell me, when's the last time you gave something to someone who needed it more than you? Share your story. Let's remember together that kindness isn't weakness. It's the thing that saves us all. See you in the next one.